Which, if they did that, would you pay it? No. You kind of have to. You'd have to because you've already invested 3 years and 3 years worth of tuition in the program. So they don't want, you don't want to join a program like that if they can be raising the prices on you. And if they can basically hold you hostage, like, oh, you did all the work to get your degree, but we're not going to give it to you unless you pay us double this year. No, that's an asymmetry. What happens if there's a lot of inflation in Thailand in that 4 years? You don't pay anymore. You still pay the same amount. But that means the real price that you're paying has gone down. Because you're paying it with nominal baht that are worth less than they would have been otherwise. So that's another example of an asymmetry. I'm not going to go through more and more examples like this, but I can give you dozens of examples like that. Reasons why prices don't adjust instantly. Now, this market is a very large market. It's also a market where we can directly trace what's happening, unemployment. And if there's unemployment, what will that do in aggregate supply and aggregate demand? Let's now move over to there, aggregate supply and aggregate demand. The classical argument for aggregate supply and aggregate demand is that this is a vertical line. Because total output is determined by real factors. How much labor do you have in the economy? How many factories do you have? How many fields? How much oil? How much stuff are you getting out of the ground? How much human capital? That's what determines aggregate supply and aggregate demand. And what can change? Sorry. Aggregate supply, aggregate demand, and then this here is aggregate supply. It looked like I was labeling that aggregate supply, aggregate demand. So this is aggregate supply, and we assume it's fixed. What makes this move? In the long run, what makes it move? Increases in human capital or physical capital. In other words, you can do things better. You can take the same inputs and get more out. That will shift it to the right. A change in technology will shift it towards the right. Discovery of a new natural resource could shift it to the right. These are all things that can shift it to the right. But when it shifts to the right, it's still vertical. And the reason why it's still vertical is because it is composed, what this Y is measuring is total GDP. GDP. Gross domestic product. Sometimes you'll see GNP, gross national product. The difference is in GNP, it's looking at the nation's income. This is looking at what the nation produces. And that differs because some of what you produce goes overseas to foreign owners, and some of the stuff that occurs overseas is in firms or workers who actually reside in Thailand, and that gets counted in GNP. So gross national product and gross domestic product, they treat overseas investment in Thailand and Thai investment overseas different. But these numbers are usually, GDP and GNP are usually pretty close to each other. And you don't need to know the technical differences between them. So, gross domestic product, or Y. It's essentially Y, which is essentially T for our purposes. So, this is total gross domestic product. The assumption is all these other markets, in all these other markets, and I can draw dozens of them, I can draw hundreds of them, I can draw tens of thousands of them, but all of them clear. All of them clear. If there is a surplus in one of these markets, prices in this market will adjust. And then in turn, prices in all the other markets will also adjust until everything is brought back into equilibrium. And kind of the way I told you to think of it is, think of it as a bathtub full of water. If you pour some water into one part of the bathtub, do you now have a pile of water? No, it flows to everywhere else in the bathtub until all the water is at the same level. And very similar in the economy. If you discover oil, so the supply of oil goes up, well then the price of oil will go down. Now you have more oil, so GDP will increase because you discovered a new natural resource, but relative prices have changed. And that will reverberate in all of the other markets. And this is a really important concept. What is it that prices do? They convey information. This is the amazing thing about prices. Prices contain all the information about supply and demand that anybody needs to know. If you're in business, if you're purchasing goods, you don't need to know what happened in the oil market. You just need to know what prices are doing in whatever markets happen to concern you. And if prices are going up, you purchase less. And if prices are going down, you purchase more. Until the marginal value of the next thing you purchase is equal to the marginal value of any of the other things you could be purchasing. And no one has to direct it. No one has to keep track of all these prices. This is why the Soviet Union failed. Well, there were other reasons as well. But this is one of the key reasons why the Soviet Union failed. They set the prices. We're communists. We're not going to let the market set the prices, so they set their own prices. But then when supply and demand changed, they never knew that supply and demand had changed because the very thing that tells us that, the prices, were set in Moscow and could not adjust. And thus the Soviet economy was riddled with surpluses and shortages. And their response was to make the economy as simple as they possibly could. If you wanted to buy shoes in the Soviet Union, you could buy black shoes. And they made them in 3 different sizes: small, medium, and large. And you bought the one that either fit your foot or was bigger. And if it was bigger, you used newspaper to make it fit. They had to make the economy as simple as they possibly could because they're trying to administratively set all these prices. Oh, and the Soviet Union had a black market in everything. Because you always get a black market when prices are not allowed to adjust on their own. So, as long as all of the prices are adjusting, this is what the world looks like. But what Keynes is saying is, no, not all the prices are adjusting. And in this market, if prices can't go down, because nominal wages are sticky downwards, then let's say this is where we work. This is the price level. This is output. Now, the price level has gone down. So the price level has gone down. But output has also gone down. Because these unemployed workers are workers who used to be working who are now not working. And this market can't clear because while they're still looking for jobs, they want jobs the same way they got them before. And it's going to take a while before they are willing to accept lower pay. And a lot of them will have to lose their job and find a job somewhere else before that happens. And this process can take a long time. And again, the example I gave was your professors, where because of the nature of the academic market, you start work at 2 times, January or September. Because everything in the academic market kind of revolves around the school year and the semester. If I lose my job now, however I manage to lose my job, probably I get caught sleeping with someone I shouldn't, like a student. Oh wow. That I would lose my job with that. Okay. I would lose my job with that. But my chances of getting a job at Chula, very, very low, because they've already set their schedule. Also because Thomas Hudson probably tells Chula don't hire me. It is a small enough world that if you get in that much trouble, there aren't that many universities that hire PhD economists, and everyone at Chula knows everyone at Thomas Hudson. So yeah, that would be that. Sorry ladies, I'm off the market. Guys, still on the market. All right. So we have unemployment. But this means when prices go down, output goes down. And now, aggregate supply has a slope. We call this classical aggregate supply, aggregate demand, or sometimes long run, LR for long run, aggregate supply, aggregate demand. Most economists believe this is what the economy looks like in the long run. Prices do eventually adjust, and the economy does eventually get back to full employment. But this is Keynesian aggregate supply, aggregate demand, also known as the short run. In Keynesian aggregate supply, aggregate demand, aggregate supply has a slope. Aggregate demand falls, you will get unemployment. Here, if aggregate demand changes, all you get is a change in the price level. Prices, in this model, prices are not sticky. So a nominal change doesn't make a difference. But in this model, prices are sticky. And thus a nominal change can lead to changes in a real variable, in this case, output. So far, so good? Yeah. This is basically repeating what I did last time, but in a slightly different order and in a different way. I'll be doing it one more time. Not today, I will. Well, I'm going to expand on it for the rest of today, but you will get it. A full walkthrough of this at least one more time, because it's hard.